so that I can send this. And every day an email is going out to, we just hit live on Facebook. At the end of every day, I'm going to be sending an email with the recordings to all 80 people, because not everyone,
yeah, of course,
you know, is going to jump into the Facebook group. I've had some people message and say, you know, I'm not on Facebook anymore. Can I still get it? So yeah, rather than wait till the end of the week, I'm doing an actual email at the end of every day with the recordings. Choose where you go live. Okay, so let me just type in here. Is this where I do it? It's going to go to a group. And it's going to go to... There we go. And next. So it's just preparing our live stream. I'll let you know when we're live. We often get that little clunky bit at the start where we go, are we live? Are we live?
yeah.
So hopefully it'll tell me in a second. Actually, I might just go in on my phone and then I'll know. Okay, it's just loading up, my love. So as soon as everything, all the dots get joined, and I can see, I'll go live straight up, and then I'll edit it later and pop all the details and everything in. So let's just hit go live. Okay, I think we might be live. Let me just check on my phone if we are. Yes, we are. Oh, fantastic. Okay, let me just get my other little video up. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to day one of the Feel to Heal Emotional Revolution with my very first special guest, Rachel Pope, who I will introduce in just a moment. I want to just, first of all, thank all of you, because over 80 people have gotten behind this. So, and I was just telling Rachel, this whole thing came to me in this, you know, blinding flash of light to bring this conversation forward, because it is through doing this work that my own life has been transformed, and how I have found this pathway to living really powerfully and peacefully. And it all comes back to our emotions, all of it. So I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us here today, and that I have Rachel as our first guest. I'm just, if you all wonder why I'm looking down, I'm keeping an eye on questions, because we're live on Zoom and we're live in the group as well. So if you have any questions for Rachel, I will keep a check on that, and then I can ask those live for anyone that has any questions. If you are watching this on the replay, please just comment with a hashtag replay or replay. You don't have to hashtag, it doesn't mean anything. And just, if you have a question after watching it, please just pop it in, and I'll direct it so that Rachel or myself can answer it for you. So this is our first emotion for the week. We have 5 emotions that we're going to bring awareness to this week. Today is all about sadness. And I don't say that sadly, I say that actually with joy, because it's something that that's what this week is all about, is to be a witness to these emotions and be a space for these emotions. And so it is with so much delight that I welcome you, Rachel Pope, my #1 guest, the first guest, to speak to this emotion, sadness. And there is no one more qualified to speak to this emotion. And I'm not going to in any way jump on that. I'm going to hand it all over. I want to do very little talking with our guests over the 5 days, because they are the people that have a story to tell about each of these emotions. And so that's who I want you to hear from. So Rachel, welcome, huge welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for having me. And I just think it's amazing what you're doing the next 5 days. I was so excited when you introduced me to the Feel to Heal, because it's just something that I'm so passionate about, lifting the lid on these conversations, and they just need to be had.
Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and who you help.
So I'm an author, a speaker, and I'm a certified grief recovery specialist. I run 7-week grief recovery programs, and also helping children with loss programs for parents and teachers and caregivers, all around that big word grief. And you know, it's an emotion in itself. Grief is an emotion that needs to be felt, and along with grief obviously comes sadness. So it's not something that we're taught about in school. We're not taught how to process it. And often as adults and teachers, and as adults, we're meant to go first too for our children, that there's a lot of myths around grief and sadness. And one of them being the don't feel sad, don't feel bad, be strong, all of those things that we model because they were taught to us possibly. And with that comes a lot of dangers, which we'll get into about, things that can come up if we don't express those emotions freely. So that's where my work mainly is. I wrote a book a couple of years called Gifts from Grief. And next year I'm rolling out those helping children with loss programs into schools.
It's so good, Rachel. Look, I'm a really people that work with me closely know how transparent I am with I call them my professional, my partnering and my parenting mistakes. And because it is from those that I've learnt the most. And one of the things that I used to do with my kids was if they fell over or they hurt themselves, the thing I would say to them was, "You're all right. Don't feel sad." I can hear it ringing in my ears. I mean, I can hear it so clearly. And, I now know, though I walked around with this badge of honor of being this mum raising these tough kids, I also know what a disservice I did to them in not helping them to understand. These days, they're in their 20s, and we have a very different approach to emotions these days. If they are feeling anything, the first thing we do is we make a space for it to be in the room with us. So, but definitely as a parent. So, a lot of what we'll cover over this coming week, I want to really preface it by saying none of this is a judgment. None of this is you did anything right or wrong. None of this is your parents did anything right or wrong. This is really just about, as I said, it's a conversation and an education and some validation to these emotions that, there's no fault or blame here. It's just it's a new day and a new opportunity to have a different conversation. And that's what this coming week is all about. So Rachel, there was an absolute reason why I asked you to be the guest for the emotion sadness. So can I ask you to share some of your story and your relationship with this emotion?
Yeah, so at the age of 17, I was studying to be a pilot, fresh out of high school, and you're meant to have the whole world at your feet. And graduated, grew up in Brisbane, and sadly, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and we weren't given much time at all. He was given pretty much 6 weeks to live, or a couple of months to live, and sadly, it was only 6 weeks from diagnosis to him passing at home. So at 17, you're definitely not equipped to deal with those kind of emotions. No one around me had experienced such loss. My friends, it was all, uni time and exciting times. So even though I had support of family and people who love you, no one really knew how to teach me how to express the grief that I was feeling with the loss of my dad. I'm one of three older brothers. And fast forward 8 years, my eldest brother tragically died in a car accident. So I was 25 at that stage and had met my husband. That was a big turning point for me because a lot of the grief came up for my dad again. Still not recognizing that that was deep grief. And that was a big turning point in my career life journey. I decided to stop flying. And it was really a big dose of perspective in life and what I wanted to do. And I wanted to get married and have kids. So we moved to the Sunshine Coast, and I worked in retail for a little while and have always been passionate about children, and ended up buying a Gymboree franchise up here, and thought this is my new career. The kids were, 4 and 6 and starting school. And we thought, yep, this will be something that I can take on. 2 weeks after signing the handover of that business, my husband was diagnosed with the same cancer as my dad. So you can imagine the emotions that came up for me then was, oh my gosh, you're going to be gone in 6 weeks, because that had been my previous experience. And what followed, even though it was a much longer time we had with my husband at home, he was 46 at the time. So we had a lot more time to process what was going on than I did with my dad. What unfolded then was, again, this uncovering of all this grief and loss from my dad and my brother that I had not processed and had not dealt with. So I was grieving them all over again. My husband passed away in 2012, and the kids were 4 and 6, and I had a business. And I jumped into the be strong mode, the be strong for my kids. I need to be strong for my families that were coming into my business. So again, it was just that pushing down of all those emotions. And it took probably 2-3 years for me to hit absolute rock bottom with that be strong mask. Running a business with 2 small kids, again, despite all the family support and emotional support that I did have around me, I knew there was a defining moment where I'm like, I need to know more about this grief business, because I can't exist like this. I can't exist just in survival mode. And I knew there was just so much there that needed to come up, and I was carrying around this big backpack of rocks, heavy rocks.
Can I ask you, how did you know, what were the indicators, this is just for people listening, that told you or helped you see or understand that you were in survival?
I think it was that awareness that I wasn't talking about it, for one. Even though I had sought some, degrees of counselling and different modalities over the years, nothing was really helping me to... there's a lot of expectation, and what I found with studying grief is that, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions around grief, and I was being told a lot of things that were logical, but that weren't helpful, because grief is emotional and sadness is emotional, and it's not logical. I was suffering from a broken heart, not a broken head. And I needed to understand grief and why I was feeling this way and why I was feeling so isolated. So I guess number one was that deep feeling of isolation and loneliness, of not being understood, thinking there was something wrong with me. So then you go down that self-diagnosis of depression or mental health, and everyone going, well, of course you're depressed, this is normal. But I guess for me, the rock bottom moment was I had no capacity for inviting happiness into my life. I was just surviving, and I was being a good mother and taking care of my kids and running a business. But I was still feeling lots of emotions around, being angry at my situation, a victim mentality. I've always been a very positive person, and people know me for that, and a very grateful person. I think that perspective was gifted to me from, losing my brother and my dad at a young age. But still, yeah, just that ability to feel happiness and joy again. And I knew that that's why we're here. I know that that's why we're here, is to feel that joy and happiness again. So I knew I had to make room for that. And the only way to make room for that was to face the grief head on. Yeah.
So tell us about that, because I mean, for anyone who's experiencing, who may be watching this or watching the replay, or has someone in their life that is feeling deep grief or sadness at the moment, tell us what did it mean to you to sort of face it head on? What did that look like?
It was daunting, and I guess it's that big fear of vulnerability that I had been strong mode for so long, that I didn't want to be perceived as, she's falling apart, and we've missed all of this, and what's going on. We thought you were going great, and we thought you're good. So I also recognized that for my children, like you mentioned before, that I wasn't doing them any favors. In one of the other 6 myths about grief and misconceptions is to grieve alone. And don't feel bad, sad, but also definitely don't feel bad, sad in public. So that isolation, and a lot of mums probably feel this, that it's the cry in the shower, come out when you've got yourself together. And and then when I started to see maybe some behaviors in my kids, or things that they were doing great and everyone thought they were doing great too, that I thought, well, hang on, I'm not showing them that it's okay to feel these feelings, even though I thought I was having those conversations around it and checking in. There was still this element of, I knew I wasn't telling my emotional truth. And then you recognize as the kids get older that if they don't feel that safe space to come and tell their emotional truth, it's because you're not telling your emotional truth, so it's not okay. And that don't feel bad, sad is just such a strong one. From very little, we want to jump in and fix, and we don't like to see our children sad or feeling any emotion. So we don't feel bad, come and have a cookie or come and have an ice cream and you'll feel better. So there was a bit of self-medication there for me too, with alcohol or food, or just shoveling down of emotions. And the more I went and researched and went looking for books on grief, I just found them to be so logical, and about the 5 stages and all of this. I'm like, well, no, I'm at this stage, and this stage is meant to be coming. I don't want that stage to come. I'm back here, and there's no linear, definition of that. So I ended up started journaling and writing myself about how I was feeling, and that's how Gifts from Grief was born, because I had to make some sense about what I was feeling.
There is a book, and the guy, I think it's a man. I'm hearing, I think it's Dennis someone. I could be wrong, but it might be a lady. But there is a 6th stage of grief that's now actually been recognised by the original founder of the 5 stages, and I believe it's meaning. Do you?
Yeah, is it David Kessler?
Maybe? Yes, thank you, David Kessler.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And a lot of what's come out of that work there too is that those stages were actually written by Kubler-Ross. She actually wrote them for somebody in a terminal diagnosis. So those stages are being used worldwide around in psychology and practices to try and define grief, but it was actually a paper written on somebody who was given a time that a terminal diagnosis. So those stages were actually written for that, not for somebody who's grieving the loss of somebody. So I only recently found that out a couple of years ago. That those stages are used so much in books. And people tend to, think, well, I'm meant to be at this stage, when it's not actually true for life after loss.
Yeah, I only recently came upon David Kessler's work myself really recently, and it was just in a podcast, and the person that was talking about it spoke to this 6th stage, and yes, so much of it made sense to me. One of the things that I've become really profoundly aware of through my children. Now, my children were 4 and 6, interestingly enough, when my marriage ended, which of course is grief and loss, and I didn't recognize it as that myself back then. But coming even forward to where they are now, so my daughter is 22 and my son is about to be 24, and my son has, dealt with some stuff this past year, and it was towards the end of last year that he gave me an enormous lesson in being able to be a witness to somebody who is experiencing emotions, of sadness or anger or shame or hurt or any anxiety, any of those emotions that tend to make if you're the parent, it's really hard to face that your child might be experiencing one of those. And so for me, my unconscious default was to just continually every day check in with him and say, are you okay? How are you feeling? And what I came to understand, because we have a great relationship and he was able to be really candid, and I use that word tongue-in-cheek, candid with me, but he literally responded one day and said, you really don't want to know the answer to that. You just want an answer that will make you feel better so you can get on with your day. And, it was like having a bucket of cold water thrown over me, but he was absolutely right. As a mum, I was asking from an open-hearted space, and yes, knowing he was feeling okay was going to make me feel better. And he's right, I probably wasn't able to be with the answer he really wanted to give. My point in this question to you, I guess a question or a statement, I'm not sure where I'm going with it, but is that what that did was it didn't give him any capacity to actually tell me how he was feeling. And that's hard, right? Because he'd been putting on this mask for all of us for so long. And alternatively to that, he would retreat from us as well. And so, yeah, it was such a pivotal moment for us, and a lot. We made a lot of progress together, and he taught me how to be a witness to emotions now, and not have an opinion, and not have a diagnosis, and to just be a silent witness and observer to someone's emotions. And yeah, it's been so important for him and for me. Can I ask you to speak to that, because I think that's an important part of this.
Yeah, and it's a big part of the Helping Children with Loss program, is that as adults we need to go first around our own emotional truth by sharing stories about how we felt at different times in our lives, but to be a heart with ears when our adult children or children are expressing their emotions, that we don't need to judge, analyze, fix, criticize, all those things, so that as if a teenager comes to you telling you something about some of the other teenagers' activities at schools, our reaction is going to determine whether they're going to come to you with information down the track. Because if we judge and analyze and criticize about what they should be feeling or what they should be doing, then they're going to say, well, it's kind of not okay to share that kind of stuff with mum, because she's going to jump in and try and fix it, or she's going to worry or make sure that I'm okay, like you've just expressed. So being a heart with ears is number one, of just letting them talk, letting them express their emotion. And at the end of it, the best thing you can say is thank you for sharing, just thank you for sharing that with me. I'm here for you. So it's allowing them a safe space to say, oh, it's okay to tell them that I'm angry or I'm sad, or I'm really upset over this. But that, yeah, again, that another one of the myths is to replace the loss. So it's like, you know, for a teenage breakup, don't feel sad, there's plenty of fish in the sea, you know, they don't deserve you, which is all true and logical and makes sense, but the emotional truth around that is that they're really hurting and feeling sad. So it's like, and also we tend to try and tell them how they're feeling too because of our previous experience. So it might be, you must be feeling this, or you must be feeling so angry, or, and they may not be feeling angry, they just might be feeling deeply hurt and sad. So yeah, that gift of listening and being in, having an open heart and allowing people with grief. It's how one of the biggest questions I get every day is, how do I help my grieving friend? Often the answer to that is to just sit with them and acknowledge their sadness, acknowledge their pain. If you want to say something, you can say, I don't know how you're feeling. I don't know how, you know, what this feels like. I can't imagine what this feels like, but just know that I'm here for you.
That's so we've got a few people, half a dozen people watching the Facebook Live. So yeah, look, that was a huge awareness for me. And when he first, because, you know, our young people communicate in Messenger, they don't tend to like a phone call. So we were having this conversation via Messenger, and he really let me have it with both, you know, I used the word candid, tongue in cheek, but he really let me have it with, you know, both barrels. And the mum in me wanted to really respond with, you know, of course I love you, blah, 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 blah. And I actually, you know, typed it all out and then delete. And all I said to him in the end was, that's fair enough, mate. Yeah, that's fair enough. You know, and it was really, you know, it was really, it really empowered him, I think, to understand there was nothing wrong with him. Because I think that's a big part of it. We think there's something wrong with us, you know, because we feel sad, or we feel anxiety, or we feel anger or hurt or embarrassment or whatever it is. The world has almost got us all conditioned to believe that there's something wrong with you if you feel that way. Can I ask you to speak to that?
Yeah, and that's one of the language tools we use is when you're talking to children, is to not say what's wrong, because automatically whatever their answer is, that you're telling them that there's something wrong with them. So, you know, what's wrong? You see a child that's hurt or sad, or what's wrong? And so we catch ourselves all the time with this language that, you know, like we've been taught or that's been modeled to us. So, and there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just how it is. So to open with other, you know, tools and language around that, there's nothing wrong with feeling sad, and that sadness is a normal emotion that we all feel. And the be strong myth is, you know, we can be strong or we can be human. And sadness is a normal emotional response to grief. So by going first and telling our own emotional truth all the time about how we feel, that's the best thing we can do, with letting them know there's nothing wrong with that.
I wanted to, I really want to make sure that Feel to Heal is all about equipping anyone who's tuning in and listening with some practical stuff. Yes, you know, it's a conversation. Yes, it's education, and yes, it's validation. But which brings me around to I've heard you use the term emotional truth a couple of times. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's one of the commitments when I'm working with participants, is that they must commit to telling the emotional truth all the time. And you know, we look at events that have happened in our life, or things that have happened maybe even right back to childhood. We don't need to go into detail and tell, you know, detail by detail about that particular event, but we can tell the emotional truth of how it made us feel. So some people can be reluctant to open up to friends or family, or to people that are in service for them, because of that fear of judgment, or, you know, being analysed or criticised, or just not acknowledged, or being told how to fix it. But the emotional truth around a story then just allows for that sadness to come up, because, or if it's anger, or if it's, so grief can be quite complex, because when I talk about unresolved grief, it's that feeling or hope for something different or better, or to have happened within a relationship. And unresolved grief is all the undelivered communications that we wish we would have had, and that can still be ongoing too in relationships that are still existing. And so by getting past that wish for something different and letting go that we can't change that, but we can deal with the emotions around the grief and sadness. Emotional truth means, not putting on the "I'm fine" mask. And a story for that, that I can relate to just so easily is with my kids. Is not long after my husband had died, I'd be in I can remember we'd made some funeral arrangements. I had to take the kids with me, and we had to stop at the grocery store to get some things. And you're rushing through, and you get to the checkout, and what's the first thing the checkout person asks you is, "How are you?" "I'm fine," and 20 minutes earlier the kids saw that I was not fine. And so little eyes looking up at you in the grocery line, it's like, oh, okay, she's saying she's fine, but that was not what I saw 20 minutes ago in the car, bawling her eyes out. So we mustn't tell people that we're not fine, and we mustn't show our emotions. So of course, we're not going to unload the whole details of our day to the people we come across, but we can release little, I call it like the steam kettle that builds up little bits of emotional truth, where I could have said to that person, "I've had a really challenging day. It's been really tough, but we're on our way home now, and we're going to make a nice dinner together." That is telling the emotional truth in front of my children, to say, "Hey, mum's not okay," but, and providing them the space that if somebody comes up to them and says, "How are you?" and say, "Well, I'm really tired right now," or "I'm really sad because, our puppy died last week," and to not do the "I'm fine." So,
oh my gosh,
that's my number one tip with the tips coming up, is to just always check in and tell the emotional truth around yourself about, what are you feeling right now? Is this anger? Is this guilt? Is this what emotion is it that I'm feeling?
Today's journal prompt. So every day in Feel to Heal, there's a couple of extra posts. One, 7 a.m. every day, Australian Eastern Standard Time. I've got some beautiful Americans on going, it's not even, it's the day before here, but, that's because Australia is really cool and we operate in the future. So
I love it.
But so 7 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, I'm popping up a journal prompt, which is really just, it's just about creating some self-awareness. This Feel to Heal is not counselling or coaching, and I have made that really clear in the registration page, and I'll just I'll be continually reminding everyone throughout the 5 days. So it's not counselling or coaching, and if you do feel that you need to reach out to somebody for some support, please do so. If you're not sure who to reach out to myself or one of the guests, and if we can't support you, we will help direct you to someone who can in your area. So please know that we are really having a conversation and raising self-awareness. So the journal prompt is to do exactly what Rachel has just said, to help you check in with observing your emotions and identifying them as not you, but separate to you, and something that you can view and something that you can look to understand. So, Rachel, I've asked all of the guests that will be speaking this week to share 3, or however it looks. I've said 3, but if it's whatever works for you. 3, I said do's or don'ts, but myths, however you want to word this, things that could really help people that are listening to this, again, for themselves or for somebody who's experiencing sadness or grief.
Mm-hmm. So number 1 is that emotional truth. So that to, try and check in and tell yourself the emotional truth around a situation. and what's coming up for you, and try and, like you said, identify that emotion. Is it sadness? Is it regret? Is it something that I wish, you know, to be different, and why am I pushing it down, and why don't I want to face it right now? And, you know, grief is so complicated that it comes in those waves where it could be in the middle of cooking dinner and, you know, something will trigger you. There's lots of triggers with grief. So the emotional truth for me now is to model that for my children, to just go, oh, just to stop and have the self-awareness and go, you know, it might be a song that's come on, it might be something that's come up with cooking the dinner, and go, oh gosh, I've just got this wave of sadness over me right now. I am remembering the time when, and then tell your story, and this is how it made me feel. So by modeling that, recognizing your emotional truth and telling a story around that, that it's okay to feel this way, taking a breath. And that leads me to number 2 is, what is the self-care? What is the next step to deal with this emotion for what it is? You know, what behavior action do I need to take to allow myself to express this behavior, this emotion? And that's what self-care looks like for me. It's not, you know, having a long bath and meditating and doing all these things. Self-care for me is, okay, I'm having this emotion around my grief. What action do I need to take? Do I need to call a friend? Do I need to have a conversation with my children because I'm feeling this around the grief with my relationship with them? Is it some regret about something that I didn't say or do? Do I need to write that down? Do I need to give some apologies or forgives in something that I'm wishing was different because I can't no longer tell that person? So number 2 is that self-care. What's the action or behavior that I need to take to deal with that emotion? And with sadness, it's often about expressing some undelivered communications. And number 3 is to seek help if you do need to not do alone. Another one of those myths is to grieve alone. It's the laugh and the world laughs with you, cry and you cry alone. That's why grievers isolate, because they don't feel understood. They don't feel like anyone understands, you know, why they're feeling is 4, 5, 6 years on, because time doesn't heal all wounds. Time passes, and that's all it does. It's time plus some correct action and some help that helps with healing. So it's not time alone. We don't pop a tire and pull up on the side of the road and say, oh, well, I'll just give it some time. It'll fix itself. We need to take some action. So number 3 is to seek some help around, you know, that emotion if you're feeling sadness all the time, because if your sadness is filling up or taking over the ability for you to feel happiness, then that's where some, you know, guidance and support is needed. And that's what it was for me. It was just taking up too much room in my heart. And with grief, the grief never goes away. It's always going to be there, because people and pets and relationships aren't replaceable. But by seeking help and getting some understanding around the emotion around sadness, it allows your heart to expand, and it allows more room for the joy to come in. So the grief is still there, but it's not taking up so much space. So number 3 is to seek help. You know, I found a lot of support in online groups. It's growing here. We are building more awareness around grief. I have my Gifts and Grief community, but at first I found a lot of them were overseas, and that's where I found some acknowledgement and understanding, was in groups online. And then locally, you know, finding some support if you're needing to talk to somebody.
One of the most amazing things about the AA, Al-Anon and the 12 Steps program, I believe, is their ability to bear witness to you are welcome there in your joy, in your pain, in your happiness, in your sadness. They do it better than they really just do it so in such a way that you know, it would be so wonderful to and I guess that's my hope for doing this this event is to bring acceptance to all parts of, you know, all these emotions. And in particular, and I just love what you said there, Rachel. You said about creating space. And it isn't about cutting these emotions away from us and so we only feel one particular thing, because that's not human, is it? It's not, you know, we're not designed to only feel one thing. If that was the case, we'd all be robots, and we're not. So, you know, the emotions are the law of impermanence, which I've shared before. I learnt through doing my 10-day Vipassana, was to understand the law of impermanence, and that is everything is rising and falling all the time. And so sadness will be here, but it will leave, and then happiness will be here, and then that will leave, and then sadness may return, and then that will leave, and all of the micro emotions and feelings that all connect into this. But to know that we are the space that holds it all, and all of it is welcome, because all of it is us, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just love that so much. I'm just going to check and see. So there are a couple of people still on live with us. So if anyone has any questions and you want to pop them up in the chat, I will just keep an eye on it now if you have any questions for Rachel. Rachel, the other thing I wanted to just touch on as well is, and I think it's so important, you referred to modelling and going first. This is something that I'm such a big fan of. Is losing the martyr badge and replacing it with a model badge, modeling life for our little people and for our big people too. So can I ask you about that? How did you find your way from martyr, which is the I'm fine, right, to model?
It was really what brought me to the grief recovery program, because I knew I had the awareness around that martyr behavior as well. But I knew it's that oxygen mask first bit. I knew that if I didn't have some completion and resolve my own grief issues, then how was I going to model that behavior for my kids? And to also have the understanding and know that no two relationships are going to be the same either, and that everyone is individual and unique. So therefore both my children are individual and unique, and we know that when we have children that siblings are different. So I couldn't have that expectation of them to grieve the same way even for themselves. So I when I stumbled across the grief recovery method and the model around going first with your own completion and having unresolved grief completed for yourself, that's when I knew, okay, well now I'm ready. And because it's an ongoing tool, it's an ongoing thing that I can use with every subsequent loss or anything that happens in my life, I can quickly go into delivering communications. And it's also the way now that I communicate with my kids is not having any expectations there of knowing that we're going to be given tomorrow. And so that every time they leave the house, there's I love you and goodbye and all the things that, we might avoid saying or too busy to say. But I'm comfortable knowing that if that's the last time they see me, then that's the last communication they had with me. So powerful in all your relationships about going first, relationships with my mum, relationships with, friends and family, being comfortable with myself, knowing that I'm not carrying those rocks anymore and I'm not carrying my own unresolved grief. So I'm not going to deflect that onto other relationships. And so the modeling first is just a continual work in progress, because I still say all the things. I still jump in and I still say, and I pick myself up all the time. Someone breaks a glass and don't worry, it's just a glass, or it's just something simple like that it just falls out of our mouths. And it's ongoing for me to model that behavior. But for me, it's just been, so powerful in communications.
I just love it. I really am so grateful. We've got people watching from America, from Canada, from parts of Australia. So I'm just so grateful. It is such an important conversation, and I'm really excited for all of the guests to share their story with each particular emotion. And I think if there's, if there's something to be said about it, awareness is such a big part of this, being able to self-observe and not become the emotion. So one of the things that I've helped this is me being ridiculously curious my whole life, to always put myself and my life under the spotlight. When things feel clunky or hard, I'll just turn the spotlight on myself and go, okay, what is here for me to be looking at right now? But really being able to instead of saying I am sad, what I practice saying now is I am feeling, or I am experiencing sadness, so that I can kind of get it with both hands and bring it round so that it's here with me, in front of me, and it's not something that is unconsciously attached to me where I can't see it. So awareness has always been a really big thing for me, and it's helped me with all of my emotions. People that knew me years ago, I was the strong, pull up your big girl panties and get on with it. And I wore that like a badge of honor. And I realized how much that was just trapping my growth and trapping my freedom and my peace from ever being fully experienced. And of course, ultimately it was teaching my kids how to be with their emotions as well. Rachel, is there? Yes.
I wanted to add with.
Please do.
With the emotion sadness, and because my work is specifically in grief, we can say sadness about a lot of things. With grief, what makes sadness complicated is when there's pain attached to the sadness. So unresolved grief is everywhere because we have pain attached to our sadness, and that doesn't need to be the case. So when you complete and you're in recovery and working towards completion to your losses, you can let go of the pain and still hold on to the love around your loss, and the sadness no longer becomes painful. So of course we're going to feel sad because we miss someone, and of course I'm going to feel sad when my daughter's dancing on stage and my husband's not there to witness that. And there's a duality around that of happy, sad moments, I call them, where I'm, just so joyfully happy in that moment. But then there's this element of sadness that comes over me, wishing that he was there. But now there's not pain attached to that sadness. So when there's pain attached to emotions, then that there's some conflicting feelings there that, like you said, it's within you and it's not something that's in front of you. I love how you put that container visual in, because it's, I'm feeling really sad right now, or like I said before, I've had this wave of sadness coming over me because daddy's not here to see you your first day of work. So I love that, having that container. What we tend to do is, when we don't express that sadness in just a healthy way like that, it's because there's a lot of other stuff sitting in there with all the other emotions that you're going to be talking about through the week, whether that be guilt or anger or resentment and having anxiety over something, when it should just be sadness in itself. It should just be sad because of this, or you're sad because you've moved, a child has moved schools, and that's a form of grief where they're missing their old friends, and they should be allowed to feel sad about that. So I just wanted to add that with grief, it's a complicated sadness.
And I want to let me also add to that as well, if I may. This is not to minimize or simplify any of this. In fact, it really is a starting point to have a conversation. And it is because for me, there's these umbrella emotions, and there's almost, so often in our life, there's just the two. You're either feeling crap or you're feeling good. But there is so much underneath both of those umbrella statements that you know, we're either good, you know, we're fine, or we're crap, you know, one or the other. And yeah, so all of this week is to not minimize anything, but in fact open it up, and if anyone can take anything away, to take away how expansive our emotions are, and how much wisdom is inside of our emotions if we begin to learn the tools to to start to experience them and acknowledge them and feel them. And and it is through the work that you do, Rachel. I just I honor you so much, and just am so grateful. Is there, I'm just having a look here. I haven't got any questions posted. If anyone has a question and you don't want to post it publicly, that's perfectly fine as well. You all have my email. You can email it to me. If it's specifically for Rachel or any of our other guests, I am more than happy to hand that on for you. Is there anything you'd like to add? Anything that that you've maybe wanted to add or say that you haven't said?
No, I think that last bit about grief and sadness was just to acknowledge that that's society just has such a misconception around that word grief, and that's why I'm so passionate in lifting the lid on these conversations about it. And sadness is okay, and that grief is okay, and that they are normal human emotions. And I think we've given our listeners some insight into how to feel that, and how to allow it, and to have the self-awareness and the self-care around it too, to what are the actions and behaviours that I need to take to process that sadness. And it's not something we need to push under the carpet.
No, humans are, something I've come to really understand is how binary humans are. We are just binary creatures. We are constantly wanting to put stuff in boxes, constantly wanting to have it either here or here. It's this or it's that. It's good or it's bad. It's right or it's wrong. But some of the work that I have been doing for myself and ultimately for people I work with is to begin to offer at least the concept of holding two truths. And you said it beautifully when you said your happy, sad moments both can exist inside of the one now moment that we're having. And I love that. And I think if we take away that as well, that we don't need to put everything into boxes. Can we dissolve some categories? Can we allow the duality and the polarizing things that we think we need to have either here or here? Can we begin to practice holding two truths at once, and being,
I love that.
Being okay with that? It's definitely helped me. And feeling my emotions has also really helped me with my yeses and nos. Being really, being able to confidently say yeses and nos. It's really helped me too. Rachel, I am, so grateful to you, and of course all of our other guests that are coming on, but especially for you today. The work that you do in grief and sadness and pain, it is, it's groundbreaking and it's life-changing. And I just want to honor you for this, and please, continue shining your light in the world. It's so needed. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for having me. And hello to everyone that's listening and listening after. And please take Jen's advice. If you need to reach out, then be in touch with her. I'm happy to connect with anyone.
And I will pass on any questions. So if you don't want to pop them in the chat, in the group publicly, that's totally okay. You all have my email address, so please feel free to drop an email. Okay, we've just on the hour, so I want to make sure that these are all in under the hour. The week is not to overwhelm. That's why I've kept the format really, really simple and really bite-sized bits of information, so that we can all at least try and find one or two things that we can take away. You know, small steps done daily have the greatest impact. So, all right, beautiful people, I am going to jump on this afternoon at 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which is just a nice way of saying Queensland time, because we beat to our own drum, Queensland. And I'm just going to share some emotional awareness and emotional relationship tools that are just will help you to unpack some emotions, that you might be having. So very simple tools, but hopefully we'll be able to support you. All right, that's it from us. Thank you again, and thank you, listeners.
Thank you. Love and strength to all.
Yes, indeed. All right, beautiful people. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.